Hey friends, welcome back to Artists of the Way. I'm Jon, one of your hosts, and today Nate and I are inviting onto the podcast Mark Sooy. Mark is a theologian, author, and musician. He has several different degrees, including a doctorate of ministry. He's just such a wonderful resource, and today we're chatting with him about worship, a lot of sort of the theological concepts of worship, and then how that intersects with an artist and their way of life. I think that worship as a part of our art is a very important piece of understanding how we function as artists. And Mark has done a lot of studying, a lot of writing on this topic. He's written books about it. He's written a ton of blog posts on it. And this was just a really, really great discussion. He had so much to offer. And I found myself growing and learning through this conversation. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Again, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited for this conversation. So I know your wife better than I know you through HPA, but it was really just kind of the last year I became familiar with some of the work that you were doing. CJ Pletcher mentioned you while we were putting together the conference, and you've just done a lot of thinking on really a wide variety of theological topics, which was really cool to see. But I was really intrigued by that concept of worship and just really enjoyed talking with you about worship as we were talking about what we wanted there for Cultivate at the end there. So I'm excited to dive in. First, though, for any of our audience members who may not know you, would you just share a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story, kind of how you got where you are today?
Sure. I'd love to. I'm I grew up down in Ohio, in the upper part of the state, just west of Cleveland, and attended churches. My family took us to churches throughout, but at some point in my teenage years, I was introduced to Christ and came to Christ as a result of that. And from that point on, really dove into studying scripture. I was a confused teenager. And I really think the Lord gave me an insight back then. Early on, the Holy Spirit said, look, if you want to get to know yourself, just get to know me. And I suppose I was naive enough just to say, okay, how do I do that? Well, study the Bible. So I started studying, and my best friend and I at the time, we studied every Saturday night. We'd get together and we pour over scripture for a long time. And eventually that led me to being called into ministry. And of course, to me, that meant, well, I've always attended this little church of 100 people. So going into ministry must mean leading a church of 100 people.
Yeah.
And I've never been a part of a church of 100 people ever since then. I've done any number of things, and my whole goal has just been to be obedient to wherever the Lord leads me. So yeah. I did pursue my theological education, which is where I have all of my degrees, my degree path, a Bachelor of Theology. I was ordained in pastoral ministry, have a master's degree in historical theology, and a doctorate in the spiritual care of Christian leaders. So
beautiful.
Came through all that. But at the same time, there was sort of this parallel development in music in particular. I'm classically trained in piano, but also classically trained in voice. And so we ended up, my wife and I, of course, I met her. She's a great musician, and much more competent in many things than I am when it comes to music and thing. But we've just opened up and said, Lord, we're willing to be used. And in fact, we consider our ministry a ministry of availability. Meaning, if something comes up and we're available and the Lord seems to be leading that direction, we say yes.
Yeah.
If we're not available, then obviously we're not available. But that has led us in a lot of different directions. From I teach college theology classes and Bible classes. I teach in a homeschool co-op. Elizabeth conducts orchestras and choirs, and I conduct choirs, and we teach private music lessons, and we lead worship and write books and write articles, and it seems like a lot, but I really think that when you're serving the Lord and doing what He's called you to do, then But it doesn't seem busy to us. Well, except when we get
Yeah.
really tired.
Sure. Do you find you have to do anything to try and steward your availability at all? Like, are there things you do intentionally to try and preserve some space for things that might come up, or is it really just sort of spontaneous? We'll just see what presents itself.
We, at one point in our journey, this is a number of years ago, uh, I was at the point of burning out because I felt like I needed to do everything and I needed to do it every day. And I was basically being disobedient in the area of taking Sabbath.
Huh.
And and Elizabeth and I sat down and I said, I think I just need to take a day off.
Yeah.
And so that's my management. And when I say a day off, a lot of my work for many years has been online. Not as much anymore, but a lot of it's been for many years, all online. And so my day off was no computer, no phone. Sometimes I'd leave my phone in the car on Friday night just because I would forget it and not realize I didn't have it until Sunday afternoon sometime.
Wow.
And I would just check out. So in that sense, I really veered toward I'm available, but I'm available within the parameters that God gave us, and that is I need to not be available on the Sabbath, and I need to do what the writer of the Song of Songs said, which was eat, drink, and enjoy the fruit of your labor. Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've tried to do that more and more, but also stay stable in a regular devotional and reading life beyond preparation for classes, which is, as you guys know, being prepared for events sometimes sucks the life out of you, and we forget about those really important personal disciplines. So that's how I've tried to manage that. But as far as managing our availability, we don't try to manage that at all. We figure the Lord will guide that, and sometimes he like lops something off, and that just happened to us at the end of the year. I was expecting some work to come for early 2026, and none of it came. And I'm like, "What, Lord? Do you know about this?" And of course, the answer is yes. I know about that. We learned a long time ago from a mentor couple that said, "You guys remember, you always need to look backwards for the faithfulness of God, and don't fear for the future." So we wait and we sit and we say, "Okay, Lord, well, you gave us this extra time. Now what?" And we wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. So is it my understanding that you're not like full-time employed at one place, but you're doing a bunch of different things at different places, and it sounds like they're all things that have really honed to your interests. Is that correct?
Yes. If we are technically describing full-time work as 40 hours for one place, I
Right.
am not doing that.
Right.
Do I
Well,
work 60 hours with a bunch of other things? Yes, I do.
Yes. Right, for sure. So what's that? Do you feel like how fortunate do you feel to be able to do like have your passions be being able to give out to people and fulfilled in yourself in all those different ways? That seems like a very special thing.
Our journey into this was, and actually, we have a different organizational structure than a lot of people in our particular situation. Many of them would be part of a 501c3 nonprofit. They would have a board and stuff like that. And I remember early on, we were talking about, okay, how are we going to manage this? And I fought back and forth in myself. Basically, what I said was, I don't want to deal with a board.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I was actually meeting with a friend, and he looked at me and said, "Mark, you're a closet entrepreneur. Form a business and do your business."
Yeah.
And so I'll talk with people and I'll say, I run a for-profit ministry.
Yeah.
Hey.
And so we look at our lives as our job, our ministry. And so no matter what that is, so some of the organizations we work with are set up to pay us as employees. And everything else we run through our own business, and we
Yeah.
essentially sell our services.
Sure.
And that sounds kind of cold because, oh, aren't you supposed to be in ministry? And my answer would be, yes, I'm in ministry, and here's the value that I bring to your organization, to
Right.
your church. So therefore, this is what I charge for that. And when they say, oh, well, we can't afford that, well, we'll say, oh, well, we're sorry, but this is what we charge. And
Right. Like a workman is worthy of his labor, right?
yes, yes, and the church is really backwards in those kinds of concepts and ideas, and it's taken me a long time to not be backwards myself. I mean, I was in full-time ministry for a long time, and wasn't always treated well financially, not just because the church didn't treat me well financially, but because I didn't know how to manage those expectations either of myself or of them.
Right. There
So
must have been like an internal conflict of I would like to be paid more or what I'm worth, but I'm ministering and I want to be giving to other people, and just that's a hard thing to figure it out, I'd imagine.
there is, and of course, there's the whole idea of tithing, and yeah, and the big picture of tithing, right? We don't just tithe our money; we tithe our time and our energy, and our efforts,
Mm,
and our talents.
mm.
We're able to structure that into our lives holistically, in that there are times when we would accept, right? An organization might say, I understand that you would normally get a lot more than this, but here's what we can offer. Are you willing? And there are factors that we bring into that, and it's not always um, a financial consideration. In fact, the Elevate conference was one of those in which it had to do with relationships in that particular case. Especially, you mentioned C.J. Pletcher earlier, and C.J. is one of our very good friends. And in a certain sense, we said, well, we need to do this because it's important to C.J. and C.J. is really important to us. So therefore, right? So that's not monetary, but that is value, right? It's value for us to
Right.
honor that friendship. And there are other things that come up in the same way. We do give sometimes scholarships to students because often other people say, hey, I like what you're doing. I have a little extra money. Can I give you some money, and can you pass it on to some of your students? And we're able to do that. And yeah, it's pretty cool how the Lord allows us to steward those things.
Yeah, that's
Pretty
awesome.
cool.
Cool. Well, let's dive into worship. Yeah, this is something I've wanted to unpack on the podcast a while. Early on, when I was sort of figuring, like exploring what does it mean to be an artist in the faith, I was looking, pretty pragmatically at it of like, okay, well, what like service do artists provide? And I think worship is often cited as one of those things of, well, when you create, you're worshiping. But since looking into that, I've gone to Bible school, I've, thought through some things more. And so my theology on worship has deepened. Um, and I think the more you explore that, the more layers there are to that. So first, I just want to ask, how would you define worship? What does that mean to you as a theologian, for a Christian?
The first thing I would do is define worship as a response to God of the benefits he's given to us. And in the words of Martin Luther, who's my favorite theologian that I quote all the time, he said now he didn't define worship this way, but this little configuration I think works really well. It's a response of fear, love, and trust. Luther talked about fear, love, and trust, and that when we respond to God, we're responding in such a way in which we fear him, we love him, we trust him. And wow, that covers everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And in so doing, I think that's a great beginning definition of worship, in which we are responding to God in fear, love, and trust, and then serving in the way that he's called us to serve.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Are there ways in which you think that should impact I guess, what we worship with. I don't know, the classic worship wars of like, okay, what instruments are you using? What songs are you choosing? How many times does the song say I versus how many times does the song say God? Are there ways where you feel like that's that principle sets some boundaries or guardrails around those things, or do you feel it is more about the intention behind what you're bringing to worship, if that makes sense?
Well, overall, my definition of worship goes way beyond music, yeah,
Mhm.
or the words in a worship song, or the
Yeah.
instruments that you use. To me, those corporate settings are the end result of the rest of what you do in your life that is worship.
Mm.
And then again, I would hold with Luther, who held his arms open wide and said, if God did not specifically pre- uh, uh, prevent it or say that it was improper, then it's okay, right? He opened up his arms and said,
Mhm.
whatever comes, this is how we worship. We worship with open arms.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
he's the one who really pushed that open for the arts and for artistic expression.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. As opposed to Calvin, who said, no, if Jesus didn't do it, then we can't do it.
Yep,
And
that's
yeah, Zwingli, Zwingli, as one of the reformers, Zwingli actually went the furthest, and he said, not only you can't do it, but let's rip all of the organs out of and burn them in the streets. That's what he did in
Gosh.
Zurich. Yeah,
I'm
because
sure those organs caused a lot of people to stumble, so that's good.
well, yeah, Jesus didn't use an organ, so we better not. So, uh, and it's
Yeah,
interesting
good point.
that Zwingli was a prodigy, a musical prodigy. You could put an instrument into his arms, and he could play it. Didn't matter what. He knew something like 24 different instruments, and yet he would not, as a theologian, allow music in the church that was instrumental. Only a cappella voices, because that's all that Jesus did. Which is
So would
nice.
he do his music outside the church then?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
So
secular music.
music as like folk music, music in the home, right? That was the entertainment style back then. They didn't have TVs and stuff, so they would obviously do it there, but just not in the church. But the nice thing about that, and this is what makes him, even though we seem like it's odd, at least he was consistent in his theology, which we can't say about many churches and pastors today about worship
Yeah.
theology.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wouldn't agree with him, but he was very consistent about it. I
Yes.
just have a tendency to agree with Luther, and eventually Calvin agreed with Luther too, because he ended up getting exiled and to a Lutheran congregation and discovered how wonderful it was that the Lutherans could sing so well, and so Calvin started backing off on his stance, which was kind of cool.
Nice. That's cool. I didn't know
Funny.
that. So you would say, yeah, we definitely, circling back to sort of the individual versus corporate level of worship. I think you alluded to the fact that we tend to think of worship as this is the part of church where we sing. That's what worship is. Um, but you're saying it goes beyond that to how we live our lives and things happening in our lives. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I sure can. I actually wrote a whole book about it. So,
Could you
and
read us your book real quick?
yeah, that's right. Well, the book is titled "The Life of Worship." Okay, the life of worship, and the subtitle is "Rethink, Reform, Renew," because, in my view, the church has to rethink worship. We, on a practical level, there's an hour that we quote unquote worship. Really, an hour of your entire weekly life, you're only worshiping for an hour. That doesn't seem right, and in fact, it's not right. So when we look at Scripture, there is some evidence. There are some scriptures that point to corporate worship settings. Okay, but those are only a portion of the overall concept of worship that we find in Scripture. I often, when I teach on this, I look at Psalm 19, and we don't have to go far. The heavens are telling the glory of God. Okay, so telling is a code word for worship.
Mhm.
How exactly are the heavens doing that? Because later on it says, there is no voice. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So they're worshiping without a voice. So
Huh?
wait, so we have to stop and ask, don't we? Wait a minute. If creation itself is worshiping without a voice, is it possible that we as humans can worship without a voice? The answer is absolutely. And in fact, if we are rightly ordered in our understanding of worship, we worship more without our voices than with them. Because I simply ask the question, all right, what are the heavens doing to worship? The heaven, let's take the sun. What is the sun doing in order to demonstrate that it's worshiping? And I'll look at, a lot of times I'm talking about this with teenagers, and I'll say, it's being a cow, right? The sun is being a cow. No, the sun, don't be absurd. The sun's not being a cow. The sun is being the sun. And that cow over there is worshiping by being a cow. And the moon is being the moon, right? The moon's not trying to be the sun. Okay. And you and I, guess what? God created us to be a particular way. And the best way to worship is to be what God created you to be.
Yeah.
And
Well,
in so doing, you are worshiping God. Because guess what? That honors God for the natural gifts that he's given. It honors God with the spiritual gifts that he's given. It honors God with the way that we serve others because we're serving them in our strengths with our gifts and abilities. And how else would we describe worship? I mean, isn't that so? All of a sudden, the things that I do, and I've planned. I haven't counted, but I've planned thousands of worship services over the year.
Yeah.
And that when I lead worship, I am not worship. Okay? Because my worship based on my giftedness and my abilities. In other words, if I'm doing what God created me to do, it's the planning and thinking through the worship that is my worship. When I then ultimately go out and I lead that worship service, I'm actually serving the congregation. I talk about gathering distractions to myself. Okay. In order that those who are in the congregation are not distracted, and thereby the Spirit has a more clear opening to speak to them if he so chooses. But if I don't the service well enough and there's a bunch of distractions, if somebody trips over that wire because nobody thought about, oh, somebody might trip over that wire, right? That's a distraction. To me, that's my responsibility as worship leader, to gather all those distractions to me, to be distracted myself, and create an atmosphere in which others are free from distraction and thereby worshiping as a community.
interesting.
So, in the context of an artist, then, I know I'm kind of jumping around between our questions, but it's making me think when, of course, so, hang on, my brain went 1,000 places. I have to rein it in. Getting podcast mode.
One place.
Would you say that an audience member, like taking in a piece of art, could be worshiping if they're taking in something beautiful that strikes them as true, either reading it or watching it? If it's a play or a concert, then maybe the artist is when they're creating it, or they may be serving the audience themselves with the work that they've made.
I think that maybe we need to think on multiple facets or on multiple levels. A playwright, a Christian playwright who writes a play or a musical, I would definitely say by they are actually serving the audience when they are writing. They're alone in a cabin somewhere in the woods and they're writing. They are serving the future audience and thereby serving God. So they are worshiping. because they're doing what God created them to do. But then
Mhm.
at the same time, when the audience actually is experiencing that, there's a certain sense in which, once again, the artist, though they might be done writing that play, is once again serving that particular audience at that particular time. And if they're involved in the production, they're serving in a different capacity. If they're not involved in it, I mean, there's a lot of different facets going on. And then, of course, that depends on the work of God in the individual person who's experiencing that event or that.
Right.
Where are they at? What's God been doing in their lives? What are they prepared to hear or not hear, etc. So I think those are all lots of different facets going on, which is why I would bring us back again to this broader idea of worship as a lifestyle. Very related to an older song from an older artist, even before you guys, but you might have heard of Keith Green.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he wrote a song. So I sort of grew up as a teenager listening to Keith Green. He was the first Christian artist that I was exposed to. And he wrote a song, and the first line of the song goes, "I make my life a prayer to you." And it's the perfect answer for, pray without ceasing. Well, how do I do that? I make my life a prayer to you. Well, how do we make our life a life of worship? And I would change it to, I make my life a worship offering, my whole life, everything that I do. So now, when I am interacting with Elizabeth, my wife, I'm interacting with our adult kids, or I'm interacting with the, dozens and dozens of younger kids that the two of us interact with now, how am I treating them in such a way? How am I interacting them with such a way in which I'm building an atmosphere in which they can blossom and thrive, and thereby provide an opportunity for them to worship? How? By doing what they were created to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, is worship not always a explicitly active thing, or can you be worshiping if, like Jon said, you're receiving a work of art or some sort of ministry, and your thought life is appreciating God through what you are receiving? Is that worship?
Well, let me answer in this way. Worship does not begin without your receiving. The first part
Right.
of worship, right? The first thing in worship, when I teach on worship, I teach in worship in what I call the four relationships. Okay. There's four relationships that we are engaged in when we're worshiping. And there's two vertical relationships, and there's two horizontal relationships. This all worship is this way, and this is taught in Scripture, especially Colossians chapter 3. The two vertical relationships are God is speaking to me, and I'm speaking to God. And the two horizontal is I'm speaking to you, and you're speaking to me. Colossians 3 teaches this. The very first one, okay, the other three don't matter unless what happens? God speaks. It's only after God speaks then that I can respond. Remember, I said worship is a response. So how do I respond? The first thing I do is respond upwards, back to God in fear, love, and trust, thanksgiving. But then I respond with my spiritual gifts and my natural gifts in serving other people. But then I'm humble enough to recognize that I don't have all the spiritual gifts. So those spiritual gifts that I'm not gifted with are coming back at me because someone else has the gift of mercy or the gift of giving or the gift of administration, and it comes back toward me. So it's both receptive in that sense. So I guess in your words, that would be a passive, right? I'm receiving the spiritual gift, the worshiping of someone else. Someone else is worshiping, and I'm receiving the benefits because they are using their spiritual gifts. And That right. And all of a sudden, when we look at it that way, we realize, wait, okay, so this is what it means for a community to worship together. A community worshiping together is not a bunch of people singing. The community worshiping together is those people over there caring for the 2-year-olds so that their parents can in turn not only be maybe part of the worship service, but they might be, I don't know, they might be part of the prayer ministry that's praying through the whole service.
Yeah.
They might be there out there parking cars, even in a larger church, or being a greeter, right? And so my view, I look at all those things and I say, oh, check out how this church is worshiping, and the service isn't even going on. They're doing the things that God created them to do. They're using their gifts. That's the broad sense of worship. And so that's how then the life of worship as an individual becomes the life of worship as a church as well. The worship is about the church living life together. And when we live life that way, God is ultimately praised, is he not?
Yeah. That makes me think of your earlier mention of like the heavens speaking the name of God, and like what do the heavens do? They're all like in relationship with each other, moving around each other, and because they have a connection, and they can only do what they do because they're connected with each other.
Yes. Yep. And relationships is really important. Worship is all about relationships. And like I said, it's a relationship with us and God, and it's a relationship with us with each other. That is worship. And in my view, then, when we are in a corporate worship setting, when I teach people how to plan worship services, I'm like, look, you can't just have a service where you're always just lovey-dovey with God saying how much you love him. And you can't have one where he's just telling you. There's all these other facets too. There's these teaching facets of worship, one way, both ways. We have to recognize all that. So it's a package. And I like to suggest that, look, we don't really get a sense of a church's worship unless we're there for several weeks in a row, because
Right.
we don't want to force fit all of those 4 categories every time into every worship service. We're going to have to experience that as we're experiencing the life of the church more generally.
Artists of the Way is currently fundraising for our next production, Bandstand. Bandstand is a wonderful musical about a group of veterans who get together to win a contest as a swing band to create a great song dedicated to the troops. They decide who better to do that than those who actually lived through it. These World War II veterans and a widow come together and rediscover their humanity, brotherhood, and find something beautiful and redemptive through their music that helps lift them out of the trauma and the disgrace of World War II. It's a wonderful show, and to do it justice, we are trying to raise $20,000 by March 1st. We are only just shy of a quarter of the way there, so anything that you can give to help us put on this show would mean a huge amount. Just go to artistoftheway.com, click on Help Us Fill the Stage, and you can sponsor whatever part of the production you like. Props, sound, music, which is very similar to sound, sets, whatever you like, all at different price points to help you be able to give whatever you can. This is a wonderful show. We're so thrilled about it. I'm really excited about the team behind it. We just think it's the right next production for Artists of the Way. So if you feel able and led, please support us today at artistoftheway.com/fill the stage.
Something that's striking me too is hearing you speak and thinking about the concept is just the real complete selflessness that requires. You're talking about the relationship between us and God and us and each other. I think a lot of times when we as Christians think about worship, at least certainly in a sort of evangelical context, we might think about, well, what's my experience in worship? Am I really feeling the worship? Is my heart really open? Am I genuine? There's a lot of thinking about what am I doing here in the worship and how's it affecting me? But really, and I feel this rings true as I think back to experiences myself where there was a really beautiful, communal moment either in church or outside of it, just as Christians living life together. It's when I get outside of my own head, outside of myself, outside of really focusing on, oh, am I doing this right? Is this giving me what I need? And more thinking about, yeah, how is God using me? And so how, let me look at the other person, or let me look at God. And like you said, just be who God created me to be. And that just takes a real letting go of our own ego and obsession almost of ourselves and our own inner experience to just get outside of all of that.
And it actually is a freeing experience as well, because now if we miss the formula, then we don't feel guilty for not worshiping. Okay. I'm not a touchy-feely guy. And so all this worship teaching that I've been under for all these years, this is why I push back on it so bad, is like, worship is not a touchy-feely, ooey-gooey feeling of you and God together. Okay. Sorry, it's just not worship. That's not the biblical form of worship. The biblical form of worship are the things that I've been telling about. It's about living life. And when you give people the permission to be what they were created to be, and they connect that with the idea of worship, all of a sudden, it's like their life opens up and they say, you mean I can just do what I like doing, and God can consider that being worshiping? I'm like, yeah, sort of like the sun doing what it does. Right? You do what you were created to be, and you weren't created to do things that you hate. You were created to do things that bring you joy, and because it brings you joy, it's going to bring other people joy. And you never know what that's going to look like. I always had visions of my own mind of what life was going to be like. But ultimately, like today, when I sit in front of 25 fifth graders, I can't help but think that this is where God wants me, because this is where I am.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, this is where God has me. I remember a number of years ago, I was teaching elementary kids music appreciation, of all things. And I was really, really frustrated, because I had these ideas about things being more significant, right? And this really plays into our worship, right? Lord, you've gifted me to be more significant, and I was already doing some writing and some thinking about worship and doing a lot of worship leading. And here I was teaching these elementary kids. And I said, Lord, why can't I do something more significant? We were having a good discussion, in which I was raising my voice. Yes. And it's one of the clearest things. This doesn't happen a lot in people's lives, but one of the clearest responses from God came in a very terse question. And all it was significant to whom? And in a split second, the pictures of all those elementary kids started going by me, and it stopped me flat. And I'm like, oh, I have the wrong perspective on this, don't I? I've offered myself up, right? I desire to live a life of worship. So I've said to God, I will do whatever you would like me to do. And he has me teaching elementary kids. And he said, this is not about you, Mark. You need to be significant. This is a significant time for those elementary kids. And that's why you're there. Don't worry about all that other stuff that you think is so important. This is what's important for you now. And man, that changed my perspective. And made me that much more responsive to when God brings up something where I'm like, you want me to what? I'm like, okay, well, I'm available, right? Okay, I'm available. So I'm going to go ahead and step through this. And I found the love of some things that I never sort of expected to really love. My fifth grade class is right across the hallway from the kindergarten classes. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go say hi to the kindergartners. I go over there and I say hi, and I just have a blast. And for whatever reason, kids that age love me. I don't know why they love me, but they do. Yeah. I just see that as I've grown, obviously I'm older than you guys. Uh, but as I've grown and continue to grow in this life of worship, I'm finding that as I open up those doors and just let God do what I've asked him to do, which is lead me and guide me and be open to whatever he leads me to do. I have that much more joy uh, uh, and
Mm.
and satisfaction in what I do, and thereby, if I have to say I feel something, I feel like I'm worshiping more appropriately.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I I've been convicted recently to worship more, like throughout the week, and so I've been trying to do that. And I'd like your thoughts on this. A verse that became the memory verse for the week is "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." From, I think it's Psalms 30 something or 40.
37:40,
Um,
37 verse 4.
there we go. Cool. Um, and then it's like, um, commend your ways to the Lord or something like that, and He
Yeah.
will act. Um, and so I've been trying to live that out a little more. And then this week, I got an opportunity to do like a kind of artistic thing that is something like I've always wanted to do. And right before this, I'd been wrestling with um like the idea of like I of I have these passions and these things I want to do, and is that a thing for me, or is that something that God is giving me? And seemed to be sending me messages saying that like he is good and he has good things for me, and that dreams that they come from him. And then right after this, I got this opportunity to do this artistic thing that I really wanted to do. And it seemed like a very affirming, like, communication from God. Like I'd been trying to delight myself in him more, and he gave me something that really desired and wanted to do. I just like to hear your reflection on that sort of thing, because some people may interpret like, well, you're not really don't really count on like God giving you what you want, because like he's not a vending machine, and really it's more about like your desires will become what he wants you to do, which is true, I think. But is there a sense of, if we are walking with him, and from your example that you just talked about, that there's things you didn't think you wanted to do, but you just discovered that it was a desire of yours, and you were delighting in the Lord with what he gave you? And I just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, if you think about that passage, I've thought a lot about that passage actually.
Okay.
Delight
Good.
yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. I have a lot of desires. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't say delight yourself in your desires.
Yeah.
It does say delight yourself in the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think when we take that seriously, he will do two things sort of that you've indicated. Number one, he will shift our thinking so that he will turn our desires and right. I think of it this way: God has certain desires for our lives that we don't know about because
Yeah.
we're just not aware of them. Right?
Yeah.
Often we'll pray for people. We all look. It's not that God's not communicating with you. It's that you're not paying attention.
Sure.
So once we start paying attention, because we're delighting ourselves in the Lord, he begins to shift that understanding of what it was we were looking for, right?
Yeah.
The deeper desires that we didn't know how to articulate. But then at the same time, I think that he does plant inside of us desires, right? When we come to Christ, the Holy Spirit comes to reside within the Christian,
Yeah.
bringing with him spiritual gifts, which combine with our natural gifts. And I think out of that interaction, somehow our spirit and the Holy Spirit working together does really create desires. And I think those desires
Yeah.
are also a gift of God, but they
Yeah.
seem to come more from us. And so there are
Right.
then that they're like your example where those desires are affirmed, and um and the result of that is you're like, oh, God, God really does want me to enjoy things. I wasn't just
Right.
going on the deep end, right? It wasn't just some strange dream, okay, about becoming famous or something like that. If the
Right.
right, there are a lot of people who have dreams of becoming famous. I remember there's another old Christian song about a guy named Charlie, and Charlie has this dream about becoming a famous rock and roll star.
Yeah.
He tells God, hey God, won't you love it when I'm famous and I can tell people about you, right? And it was
Yeah.
that it was about him, right? And it wasn't about following God's desires for him. So I just
Yeah.
so I think it's twofold. I think it's both an affirmation of these desires that God kind of plants in us that we think about and we realize, oh, I like this and I like this and I put these things together, etc.
Yeah.
Or like you said, you had a dream. Someday I'd like the opportunity to do this. And all of a sudden, oh, wait, now I have the opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of related things that go on to that, right? It could be, when you get older, you'll have dreams that are 40 years old that you've never had a chance to do
Right.
yet. And,
Sure.
well, maybe you're not ready, right? So God has just
Right.
been waiting. God's been waiting for you to get ready, to be obedient in other areas. And then all of a sudden, that opportunity presents itself. And I think that's true actually no matter how young you are. I even talk about this with my teenage students. I'll say, look, God is preparing you for today for what he has for you tomorrow. And each experience you go through, he's preparing you with
Yeah.
that experience with what you're going to go through in the future. You don't know right now when you're going through this as a 15-year-old, that when you're 33, this experience is going to speak into that. And it's going to be really important that you have this experience. But that's under God's timing. And fear, love, and trust, right? We have to fear God enough to know that he has our best in mind. We have to love him enough that we trust him and let him manage the timing of it all.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. Now I had that experience of like, oh, I got this opportunity. I was like very excited about it, but I always often go to mistrust of myself, of like, now why are you excited about that? Is it just
Mm.
because like, oh, you want to become like famous by doing something like this? And but then like thinking through like maybe it's actually more because this is just what God made me to do. And maybe
Yeah.
that's why I'm excited about it. Um, and I'm there. We still are fleshy. There can be still some of that other stuff on the edges, but I'm hoping at the core of it is that I'm just excited because like God made me to be excited about this kind of thing.
Right. And you have to work through those fleshly temptations as well. And it goes back to that parable where, you know, God gives you a little bit, and if you're trustworthy in that, then he's going to give you a little more. And if you're trustworthy in that, he's going to give you a little more. And so he uses those little things to build those character traits in which you can realize this is not about me getting famous. It's not about me being popular. This is about me serving these people that are around me. And so I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, and I'm going to learn from it, and then maybe God will trust me with more next time.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
What are some ways you think we can cultivate that sort of worshipful, selfless heart, the heart that is trying to delight in God? Because I can think as an artist, I might get into a creative and it's just so easy to think about what do I want it to be and what am I trying to, what do I want to get out of it? I get this role. What do I want to get out of this experience of playing it? Um, what are some ways, just as we go about our life, that we can tend to that kind of heart, so that when we get into those moments when we're doing the thing we were created to, um, we may more naturally find ourselves more selfless, more open to offering it up to God.
Yeah.
All I can really do is speak from my experience in this, which my natural inclination is to plan and orchestrate things. You know, when I do those personality profiles, you know, I'm the mastermind, they call me, and that kind of thing. And I can mastermind a lot of things. You know, I can. Another one says that I create reality from my head. Right? If I if I can think it, if it's in my head, I think that it can be done. So that's not always conducive to, Lord, what would you like me to do?
Yep.
And so my experience came as a result of losing all of my employment once, literally all of my employment.
Oh man.
And I had nothing, and I'm a list maker, right? I have you know, I have a Franklin day planner, and I've had lists for days and days, and I have years and years of records of all my lists, and
You
I
need those. Yeah.
yeah, I would get up in the morning at that time, and I would look at my list, and I would say, Lord, I don't have anything on my list. I don't know what to do today.
Wow.
And then I would say, so I'm going to trust you to fill this list in and I'm going to do what I can.
Yeah.
Right. So then I started getting a little bit of work, but I'd get up in the morning and I'd say, Lord, I do have a few things on my list today, but I really don't know if they're the right things on my list. So if you need me to do different things, I'm going to trust you to alter my plans and help me to go through those good works, right? Ephesians 2:10, we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works that God has planned beforehand that we should walk in them. So every day
Yeah.
you get up and you say, okay, Lord, you've prepared these good works for me. I don't know what they are. Okay. So therefore, I have this list. I think some of them might be on there, but I don't know for sure. So I need to trust you. I need to allow you to be, I need to be flexible enough to allow you to be the Lord of my life and not me to be the Lord of my life because I have this list here. Now, often God has been gracious, especially as my schedule has expanded to the place that it is now. Sometimes he lets me finish my whole list, which is a very gracious thing for him to do in with my personality type. But I can't say that it's often, you know, often. I had this discussion with him just in the past few weeks. And I said, Lord, I don't know if this is the direction I should be heading. You know, because I said there was this shift, right? Into the new year, there's a shift in part of my work life. Like where I've ended up is not, I remember mentioning to Elizabeth, I said, when the Lord shut that door, I did not expect him to open this door. But I'm just going to walk through this door because this is the door that's open.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, that's this idea of, okay, Lord, I get up every day. I do have things that I have to do because you've provided work for me. You want me to steward that work. You want me to be responsible. I understand all that. But still, there might be some things that aren't on my list that are really important to you. So I want to cultivate that willingness to set aside my priorities and step into your priorities. And so that's my journey that might encourage others. It might encourage you as far as how to really cultivate that. And as an artist, any kind of artist, right? We set all kinds of goals for ourselves, whether it's learning a new piece of music or finishing a painting, or if you're a writer, or whatever it might be. And sometimes we get frustrated because we're not meeting our goals, rather than
Yeah.
saying, oh, well, maybe those were my goals and not God's goals, and maybe by doing some of these other things, I was actually meeting God's goals, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, that's convicting. That's great. Well, we're nearing an hour, so I'm gonna take us to our last couple questions here. First, are there any resources you would recommend to anybody who wants to explore this topic of worship more, wants to, think through what it means in their life as a Christian or as an artist?
All of my resources.
Right. Yeah. What are your books?
My main book on worship is called The Life of Worship, Rethink, Reform, Renew. And I sent that link, so I think you have that available
Yes.
to you. If you are more heady and would like a more scholarly approach, you can read my other book, which is called Essays on Martin Luther's Theology of Music. And that's it's very academic, and it's essentially my master's thesis that I printed. So it's a little more technical in that sense, but it's a fascinating, actually, that's the background for The Life of Worship. So
Sure.
the two actually work together. And then I do have my personal blogs called worshipthink.com, which has all kinds of archived articles on worship from all different perspectives. And then I'm currently writing for the Wilmington Standard on Christianity and culture. And often that intersects with ideas of worship. In fact, some of the most recent ones are about worship. I think he's just getting ready to post one about beauty. So those are important.
Very cool.
And then as far as beyond me, obviously I'm not the expert in all this, the guys I learned from, okay?
Second tier of people. Yeah.
You all need to read and know and love Francis Schaeffer's book, Art and the Bible. Okay?
Yeah.
You just have to. I would also suggest that mature Christians, I would never show this to teenagers, but mature Christians should watch Roger Scruton's documentary on beauty. It's 1 hour long. It's by, you'd find it on YouTube. Just Roger Scruton. He's a Christian philosopher. He did a 1 hour documentary on beauty, and it just eye opening, and very good, very, very good perspective on what's happened to beauty. In fact, Roger Scruton believes that the destruction of beauty is the destruction of Western society, and he builds that case very well. So I would go there, and then let's see, who else do I? Scruton and Schaeffer. Let me look at my bookshelf. I do have lots of books on worship. I review a lot of them, and just frankly, just not a lot. Which is why I wrote my own book, because I'm just like, there's a lot missing here that's really, really important. For me,
That's great.
Well, unfortunately, you can't really just go to a book by Luther on worship, although that would probably be one of the best ones.
You should assemble one.
Yeah,
Put all this worship stuff
he did
together.
write. It's only in Latin, so I've never found it translated.
Nah.
But the result, you end up having to read a lot of Luther in order to kind of boil down his ideas. But for me, my own personal theology of worship is the result of my studies in historical theology, because I've read, I have books on worship in the early church, worship in the medieval church, worship in the Reformed church, worship in the Lutheran church, worship in the Methodist church, worship in the Charismatic church, right? All these different things. And so that really broad reading and a broad understanding of how worship has developed, right? The study of historical theology is the development of theology. That's what we're studying. So that's my interest. So I get that from a pretty wide spectrum of reading. But I would say the most significant to me were Scruton and Schaefer, and also is it Rookmacher that wrote I think it was Rookmacher. I don't remember the name of the book right now.
If you do remember, send it to me and I can include it in the show notes
okay.
down below for people.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Perfect. Cool. Lastly, is there anything that you're working on that you would like to share with our audience?
I'm actually working in a little bit different field right now. A friend of mine are in discussions, and I'm working toward a course called Faith, Family, Culture, Country, Defending What Matters Most.
Okay.
And it's because we've identified the fact that our faith, our families, our culture, and our country are under attack.
Yeah.
They're under direct attack from other religions, other countries, other worldviews. And for the most part, the church is not ready for that. And so what do we need to know to defend it? We want to build a biblical case for here's what the Bible says about defending these things and protecting them. Here are historical examples of how the church and how individual Christians have protected these things in the past and defended them, as well as the practical steps about what do you do? What do you actually go do, right? We're both sort of tired of hearing Christians say, "Oh, you need to stand up." Like, okay, so then what do we do, right?
I'm standing, now what?
All right. So, to put some legs, some ideas on, okay, well, what does it mean to defend your family? Well, it means to have your home protected. What does it mean to have your home protected? Well, it means, have you really gone around and from the outside and looked at how easy it might be to get into your house? And what are you going to do about it, right? What are the action steps of that? So those are the four categories: faith, family, culture, and country. And so that's a work in progress. Working on maybe a 6 to 8 week program, both online or live. And I'm even working on producing that for a full year course for teenagers. So it's a pretty big undertaking.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's complex. That's going to be rich. That's cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for making some time.
Well, I appreciate your time and the invitation. Really enjoyed spending the time with you guys, and maybe we can do it again sometime on a different topic. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yes.
That'd be wonderful.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good day.